There is an intelligence in silence that most people do not understand. A person sits in a room full of conversation. Around them, voices weave small talk, comments about the weather, observations about shared acquaintances, the kind of empty calories banter that fills the space between people without actually connecting them. And the silent person listens. They do not join in, not because they cannot speak, but because the words feel hollow before they even leave their mouth. They are waiting for a moment of real conversation, waiting for someone to say something that matters, waiting for an opening where depth is possible. But small talk rarely offers such openings. Small talk is designed to fill silence, not to deepen it. And for someone whose mind works in the language of meaning, small talk feels like being asked to speak in a language they never learned. So they stay quiet, and the world mistakes their silence for coldness, for shyness, for a lack of social skill. But the truth is more nuanced. The truth is that their silence is discernment. It is a nervous system that has learned to speak only when speech is worth the effort. It is a mind that cannot be satisfied with the surface when the depths are calling. This is the story of what it means to prefer silence over small talk, of finding your voice by listening, of discovering that the quietest people often have the most profound things to say. Chapter 1. Recognition, emotional beginning. Silence is not absence. For the quiet person, silence is presence. It is the presence of a mind that is working, processing, thinking deeply about what has been said, what could be said, what should be said. The quiet person is almost never not thinking. The silence does not mean emptiness. It means the opposite, a mind so full that it cannot let words escape casually. They have spent their entire lives being told that their silence is a problem. In school, teachers marked them down for not participating in class discussions, not understanding that the quiet student was often the one thinking most deeply about the question. In social situations, they were labeled as shy or unfriendly, not recognizing that they were listening more fully than anyone else in the room. In relationships, they were accused of shutting down or being emotionally unavailable, when actually they were protecting a tenderness that needed more safety than the conversation could offer. And so the quiet person learned to apologize for themselves. They learned to force small talk, to participate in banter even when it felt meaningless, to smile and nod while inside they were dying of boredom. They learned to be less themselves in order to be more acceptable. But there is something else happening too. The quiet person is discerning. They are choosing their words carefully because words matter to them. They have noticed that most conversation is just noise, filler meant to ease the discomfort of silence. And they cannot do that. They cannot say things they do not mean. They cannot engage in the false intimacy of small talk. The performance exhausts them. When the quiet person does speak, it is usually to say something true, something observed, something that came from thinking rather than reacting. And often the impact of those words is disproportionate to their frequency. People remember what the quiet person says because there was intention behind it, because it mattered. But most of the time, the quiet person is listening, truly listening, not formulating their response while someone is speaking, not waiting for their turn, but actually receiving what the other person is saying. And in that listening, something profound happens. The speaker often feels truly seen, truly heard, in a way that rarely happens. The quiet person's greatest gift is their attention, but the world does not know how to value attention. The world values noise. The world assumes that the loudest person is the most interesting, the most intelligent, the most worthy of attention, and the quiet person, whose intelligence runs deep and whose thoughts are hard-won, is overlooked. There is loneliness in this. The loneliness of being misunderstood, of being in rooms full of people and feeling completely alone, of having thoughts and observations and insights that no one asks to hear. of being judged for not wanting to participate in conversations that feel empty. But there is also a kind of pride, a quiet pride in knowing themselves, in valuing depth over breadth, in being willing to be alone rather than be false, in trusting that their way of being in the world, though unconventional, is valid. Chapter 2: Root Cause Origins. The preference for silence over small talk often begins in childhood. Some people are simply born this way. They are introverts, people whose nervous systems are energized by solitude and drained by too much social stimulation. They are naturally drawn inward. Their minds tend to turn toward their own thoughts rather than toward external stimulation. This is not shyness. It is not social anxiety. It is simply how they are wired. And for the introvert, small talk is not a pleasant way to connect. It is an exhausting performance. Others develop this preference through experience. They are sensitive to social cues, perhaps too sensitive. They read the subtext beneath every conversation. They notice when someone is performing instead of being genuine, and they become disgusted with inauthenticity. They cannot engage in small talk once they see it as a game everyone is playing, a way of avoiding real connection, so they stop playing. Some come to this preference through neurodivergence. Autistic people, people with ADHD, people with language processing differences, they often experience communication differently than neurotypical people. They may need time to process before speaking. They may find the rapid back and forth of small talk overwhelming. They may prefer the directness of meaningful conversation to the indirect dance of social niceties. And they learn to prefer silence, where they can think over being forced to fill space with words. There is also the matter of sensory processing. Some people are highly sensitive to sensory input, loud social environments, overlapping conversations, the need to read facial expressions and tone while also formulating responses. It is all too much, and so they withdraw. They become quiet not because they have nothing to say, but because everything is too loud and too much. Many quiet people grew up in families where emotional expression was not safe, where words had power to hurt, where saying the wrong thing could result in punishment or rejection, and so they learned to be careful with words, to think before speaking, to stay silent when speaking might cause harm. This caution never left them. There is also the experience of being unheard. Many quiet people, when they were young, had their attempts at conversation dismissed or ignored. Their thoughts were not valued, their perspectives did not matter. And so they stopped trying. They learned that speaking was futile, that silence was safer. And now, as adults, they carry that learned silence forward. What all these pathways have in common is this. At some point, the quiet person learned that their way of being was not acceptable to the world. They learned that the world values noise over silence, extroversion over introversion, quick responses over deep thinking, and they accommodated. They learned to be smaller, quieter, less themselves. Chapter 3: Scientific Psychological Explanation. The science of conversation reveals something important. The world's obsession with small talk is not scientifically justified. Research shows that people who engage in deeper conversations are significantly happier than people who engage primarily in small talk, not slightly happier, significantly happier. Deep conversations create stronger bonds between people. They create greater sense of meaning and connection, and people consistently underestimate how positive deep conversations will be. They expect awkwardness and disconnection, but what they experience is the opposite. The question is, why do so many people still engage primarily in small talk if it is not as fulfilling? One answer lies in miscalibrated expectations. People do not realize that others want to have deep conversations. They assume that the people around them are comfortable with surface-level chat, so they do not attempt depth. And because no one attempts it, everyone assumes no one wants it. And so the cycle continues, people starving for meaningful conversation while pretending to be satisfied with small talk. There is also a neurodivergence angle. Neurotypical communication and neurodivergent communication have different goals. For neurotypical people, the function of small talk is connection. It is about maintaining relationships, easing social discomfort, and signaling friendliness. The content matters less than the fact that conversation is happening. For neurodivergent people, the function of conversation is different. It is about exchanging information, about exploring ideas, about genuine connection around a shared interest or topic. Small talk serves no function for them. In fact, small talk can feel alienating, a barrier to real communication rather than a gateway to it. There is also something called the pause, a moment of silence in neurodivergent communication where the person is processing, regulating, and gathering data before responding. Neurotypical people often interpret this silence as avoidance, shutdown, or refusal to engage, but it is actually the opposite. It is the person making the effort to engage meaningfully rather than reactively. The quiet person's brain often works differently. They may need more processing time. They may think in visual images rather than words. They may have auditory processing difficulties that make rapid conversation exhausting. They may be hyper-focused on the content of what is being said, making the social performance of small talk seem irrelevant. There is also the matter of introversion at a neurological level. Introverts' brains are wired differently. They have different dopamine sensitivity. They are energized by lower stimulation environments and drained by high stimulation ones. Social interaction, particularly in groups, is high stimulation. Small talk is particularly high stimulation because it requires constant attention to social cues while also formulating responses. No wonder the introvert finds it exhausting. The quiet person's silence is not a deficiency. It is a different communication style, a different processing style, a different way of engaging with the world. And research suggests that this way of being is often more thoughtful, more careful, and more likely to result in genuine connection than the constant chatter that characterizes modern social life. Chapter 4: Inner Conflict Resistance. The quiet person lives with a painful contradiction. They prefer deep conversation. They crave meaningful connection. They want to be fully known and fully knowing of others. And yet the world does not provide the conditions for this. The world offers small talk, surface-level connection, the performance of friendliness without the substance of genuine care. And so the quiet person is caught. Do they participate in small talk in order to connect, sacrificing their authenticity? Or do they maintain their silence, remaining isolated in their integrity? There is a deep resistance to small talk within the quiet person. Every cell of their being rebels against saying things they do not mean, against discussing topics that bore them, against the performance of social acceptability. And yet they also know that by refusing to engage in small talk, they are cutting themselves off from connection. Many quiet people have learned to force small talk, to paste on a smile and chat about the weather or the latest TV show, even though inside they are screaming for something more substantial. And this performance is exhausting. It is a constant betrayal of their own nature. And over time, it builds resentment. There is also the pain of being misunderstood. The quiet person is often assumed to be unfriendly, cold, or arrogant. People think they're being judgmental by not participating in small talk. They think they're being withdrawn or difficult. They do not realize that the quiet person is actually listening more deeply than anyone else, that they care more about the authenticity of connection, that their silence is not rejection, but selectivity. The quiet person also often feels guilty for not participating. They feel like they should be able to do small talk easily, that there is something wrong with them for finding it so difficult. They judge themselves for being bad at socializing when actually they simply have different values about what socializing should be. There is also an isolation that comes with this. If the quiet person insists on meaningful conversation, they will have fewer conversations. They will attend fewer parties. They will participate less in the social rituals that hold society together. And they will be judged for this. They will be seen as antisocial or unfriendly, when actually they are just unwilling to participate in interactions that feel false. The quiet person also sometimes resents the people who engage so easily in small talk. They see it as superficiality, as a refusal to engage with reality in any meaningful way, and they judge others for being content with small talk, which creates further isolation because they cannot respect the social conventions that others rely on. Chapter 5. Turning Point Realization. The turning point often comes when the quiet person meets another quiet person. Suddenly, they are in a conversation where silence is not awkward, where words do not have to fill space, where depth is not only possible, but expected. And in that conversation, the quiet person experiences something they have been missing: the feeling of being fully seen, of being able to speak without performing, of being accepted exactly as they are. And in that moment, something shifts. The quiet person realizes that their preference for silence is not a deficiency. It is a preference, and preferences are okay. Some people like small talk, some people like silence, some people like deep conversation, and all of these are valid ways of being in the world. The turning point might also come through research. The quiet person discovers that there is actually science supporting their preference. The deep conversations do create stronger connections. That introversion is not shyness. The people who think before speaking are not lacking anything. And suddenly, they do not feel so broken. It might come through therapy. Someone finally validating that their way of being is okay, that they do not have to force themselves to be different. That authenticity is more important than conformity. That the world needs quiet people just as much as it needs loud people. It might come through acceptance. The quiet person stops fighting their nature and starts honoring it. They give themselves permission to stay quiet when small talk is happening. They stop apologizing for their silence. They start seeking out people and situations where depth is possible. And they discover that there are more such people and situations than they thought. The turning point is when the quiet person realizes, I do not have to change, I just have to find my people. And once they have found their people, everything changes. Suddenly, they are not broken, they are not cold or unfriendly. They are simply someone who values authenticity over performance, who values depth over breadth, who prefers meaning to noise. Chapter 6. Healing Integration. Healing for the quiet person is not about learning to enjoy small talk. It is about finding peace with who they are, while also learning to navigate a world that does not automatically honor their way of being. It looks like giving themselves permission to stay silent in situations where small talk is happening. It looks like not judging themselves for not participating. It looks like accepting that they will have fewer but deeper friendships, and finding that this is actually what they wanted all along. It looks like seeking out their people, the other quiet ones, the deep thinkers, the people who value meaning over noise, building a community where depth is the default, where silence is comfortable, where their way of being is understood. It looks like learning when small talk is necessary and engaging in it without guilt. Knowing that sometimes a brief surface-level interaction is a lubricant that makes society function, and being able to do that without losing themselves. It looks like discovering their voice, not necessarily becoming louder, but becoming clearer, saying fewer things, but saying them with more impact. Learning that their words have power precisely because they are infrequent. It looks like finding ways to process and connect that honor their style, maybe through writing, through deep one-on-one conversations, through shared activities that do not require constant verbal interaction, through meaningful online communities, through whatever channels allow them to be authentically themselves. It involves grieving the years spent forcing themselves to be different, mourning the friendships that were based on false versions of themselves, and then slowly building relationships that are based on authenticity. It involves recognizing that their listening is a gift, that their thoughtfulness is valuable, that the world needs people who think before speaking, who observe carefully, who see what others miss, whose silence is often more eloquent than words. Chapter 7, Poetic Closure Reflection. There is a particular kind of eloquence in silence. It is the eloquence of someone who has chosen their words carefully. Someone whose speech is marked by intention, someone who understands that not everything needs to be said, and that sometimes the most profound things are left unsaid. The quiet person who has made peace with themselves becomes a kind of anchor in a world that is too loud. Their presence is calm. Their attention is genuine. Their words, when they speak, carry weight. They become the friend who listens deeply, the partner who hears not just words but meaning, the person in a group who notices what others miss, whose silence holds space for others to be heard, whose thoughtfulness creates safety for authenticity. The world would tell the quiet person that they are broken, that they need to be louder, more talkative, more socially engaged. But the world is wrong. The quiet person is not broken. They are simply different. And that difference is not deficiency, it is distinction. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you are someone who prefers silence over small talk, know this: your silence is not a prison, it is a sanctuary. Your preference for depth is not a barrier to connection, it is a gateway. Your quiet way of moving through the world is not a flaw, it is a gift. You do not have to change to be acceptable. You do not have to fill space with meaningless chatter. You do not have to perform friendliness. You can be exactly as you are, thoughtful, careful, intentional, and still be worthy of love and connection. The people worth knowing are the people who can appreciate your silence, who understand that your quiet listening is a form of love, who value what you have to say precisely because it is not said carelessly, who see your depth and respect it. And there are more of those people than you think. The world is full of quiet ones, of deep thinkers, of people who have also been misunderstood for their silence. And when quiet people find each other, something beautiful happens. They do not have to perform. They do not have to apologize. They simply exist together in a silence that is not empty, but full of understanding. Your way of being in the world is valid. Your words are valuable. Your silence is not something to overcome, it is something to treasure. And in that treasuring, you discover that you were never broken. You were simply waiting for people who spoke your language. And now, in the company of those people, your silence becomes what it always was meant to be: a form of speech, a way of loving, a method of connection that runs deeper than words.